But again, when you think about Psalm 23, look at the reality of how incessantly declarative it is. This David, adulterer, murderer, arrogant, taking a census, denying God, feeding the flesh, coming to God, feeding the flesh, coming to God, feeding the flesh, and at the end of it all, he can say so declaratively, such a confidence in the Lord that he's like, surely, 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 surely. Surely God will do these things. Surely. I know my God in full confidence. I know exactly what to expect from my God. Regardless of all the things that's going on. Regardless of the valley of the shadow of death. What have we talked about the valley of the shadow of death? What is it? Shadow. It's a shadow. It's a holographic projection. It's not even real. It is a holographic projection of death because even David, an anointing of God, often speaking of the Christophanies, looking forward to the Messiah, Jesus Christ, him as a particular lineage, as written into the lineage of Jesus Christ, knew that death was literally a holographic projection. Obscure, just a removal of light, looks way bigger than a real thing, yet nothing can touch you. And he's like, even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I'm not going to fear any evil. I know my God. He's with me. He'll deliver me. Oh, and by the way, at the appointed time, He will make me lay down in green pastures. Oh, and by the way, at the appointed time, He will restore my soul. I don't need to fight and claw to restore my own soul. I need to fight and claw for my own sense of comfort and frivolity or whatever. He will make me do it at the appointed time. He will totally restore me, and He's going to comfort me, and surely I absolutely know that His goodness is going to go before me all my days. Oh, and by the way, I know the end of the story. All the enemies of God and my own enemies are ashes under the soles of my feet, Malachi 4. I know what's coming. And He's going to prepare a table before me right in the presence of my enemies. And most people don't understand that conquest type language, right? Most people don't understand that language even when it talks about Christ being a fragrant. I think I had a stroke last night. We'll see how my speech impediment does for the day. Most people don't understand this conquest language that's used all throughout Scriptures, right? It says, Christ is an aroma. To the perishing, He's this stench. But to those who in righteousness are in, and He smells like this. That was a parade of conquest about a conquering king coming into a city. And the defeated, to them, all they could smell was death and stench and putrefaction and all the horrors and traumas of war. But to those who He's delivering as a conquering king, He was a pleasing aroma. It was a smell of cakes and incense and acceptable sacrifices and feasting and joy because the enemy had been vanquished. See, Christ is a particular aroma depending on which side you are, which side of the belligerence you're on in this field of battle. It says the same thing in Psalm 23 about this parade of conquest. What it looks like to prepare a table for you in the presence of your enemies. That's what they would do. Every time they would conquer, and they'd bring in all the ruling enemies who they conquered, and they would set out a banquet table, and they would literally make their enemies sit at the banquet table as well as an affront to them of their superiority and their dominance and their supremacy over all things. Now you sit at my table, enemy, and if you're lucky, we'll feed you. And then we'll negotiate from here on out what we're going to do with you. Usually it ended with the sword. So that's what it's speaking of in Psalm 23. So again, if we don't know this language, we don't understand the power and the efficacy. I need like a speech therapist right in front of me all the time of what's going on here. So anyways, I think of Psalm 23 regularly. And again, I hate the reductionism of it because of Sunday school. It's not bad, right? I get it. We're teaching young children to know the Word, to put their trust in God. But it's kind of like the song Amazing Grace. You hear it at every reprobate, lawless, God-hater's funeral. And we just come to think that this is a normal song to sing. Listen to the liturgy contained within that song, Amazing Grace. It should make you undone every time you hear it. But sometimes we hear it so much that we're not undone by it. It's just a thing that we know that we can sing to, right? So, I digress. All right. So, what we're going to do today is we are going to have an interruption from your normally scheduled broadcast of matters of the heart. You guys know periodically I choose to do this. I think it has value. It has value for you as a body. It has value for me as a part of your body as well too, is to have open dialogue and open discussion about stuff that's going on or things that are on your own hearts. It's always amazing what comes out. Sometimes there's freedom and deliverance that occurs, or confession and repentance, and other times it's just realigning and getting everybody back on the same page of different stuff. So today I want to have, for lack of a better word, an open forum so you guys can be thinking about questions. But I want it to be particularly, see? I need more coffee. Somebody goes, you don't have a speech impediment? I was like, you don't know me very well. Luke, do I? Oh yeah, he hears it all the time. Yeah, it's very disorderly. I'm like Moses. I'm a man of stammering lips. But I want to talk about the reality of what's going on globally. I don't expect you guys to. I would never put that requirement on you. So I know that a lot of times you guys don't hear the things that I'm doing like throughout the week till we gather here, right? You don't hear the interviews and blah, blah, blah. They're all over the place. I'm doing them all over the place. A lot of times I never even share them or post them because they're proprietary. So they go behind whatever host paywall, and they're just all over the place. I don't even know where they go half the time. They're on these channels and that channels and these broadcasts or radio or it's TV or it's whatever. I don't even know. I'm doing them all the time. So I think I probably take for granted that I just assume that you guys are keeping up with stuff that's going on because I'm always speaking to it and we happen to be in intimate fellowship and community, but I don't want to take that for granted. You may not be in tune to the reality of what's going on. So it's hard to know how to even break into this, but you guys are all aware that Hamas and Israel are at war, right? Okay, so we'll kind of just give cliff notes and then we'll open it up to discussions. And this is why this is critical for us, is there's an attribute that the church has forfeited, and that we like to use the emotionally predatory language all the time about being the sons of Issachar, right? We got to be like the sons of Issachar who know the times. And that's where they stop. What's the second part of the verse? They had understanding of times and they knew what Israel must do. See, everybody right now wants to have an understanding of the times, but nobody's offering solutions. Nobody's telling the church, the Israel, right, the grafted in Israel, what they ought to be doing. But everybody wants to know about the times, the latest, greatest intel, the blah, 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 right? All the stuff going on, all the eschatology. But nobody is telling us what we ought to do. So that's what we want to get into today. I've been very burdened, like even we as a church body. You guys all know my background, right? My pedigree, which I count as garbage compared to knowing Christ. And yet, still, there's a disconnect even for us in our intimate church body of having an understanding what we must do. Luke and I talk about it regularly. How do we get organized? How do we get coordinated? How do we start getting people off their normalcy bias, off their cognitive dissonance, off all these things that are a stumbling block to them understanding what just happened in the last 2 weeks? Really in the last week. Yeah. Everything, church, changed. Everything changed. This is, I believe, could be wrong. I always give that caveat because we could be. Because God's God. He gets to determine the timing. Psalm 83 war kicked off last week. Psalm 83 war is radically significant. It rolls into what would be the Gog, Magog, Ezekiel 38, 39 in the war. It would get into the fulfillment of Isaiah 17, which Damascus becoming a ruinous heap. By the way, Netanyahu just said, if Hezbollah enters the war, we will make Damascus a ruin. Yep. These guys, these secular God haters, usually they're high-level cultists, especially in Israel, they're all Kabbalists, right? Or Talmudic weirdies. And they're uttering prophetic utterances without even knowing that they're actually speaking what God already wrote in the Word. And so they're doing this in real time. So you have Hamas coming into Israel, surprise attack, in the suddenly, in the instant, in a single day, in a single hour, troops running upon their walls, troops scaling their walls. Read Joel. Joel has not been fulfilled yet. The entire book of Joel is a future prophetic fulfillment which potentially some of the attributes of this is. When you read about the locust army of Joel, I know there's a lot of great scholars out there that want to make that about transhumanism and transgenic monsters and all these things. This locust horde, because they're trying to attach it to the book of Revelation, the locust coming out of the bottomless pit. Joel gives an exact qualifier for what's going on here. It talks about the nations, an Arab League of Nations. The Arab nations, as the locust army, coming against all the way to Jerusalem, converging on Jerusalem, just like it says in Zechariah 14 is going to happen. They're all going to come right to Jerusalem, then God acts. What's interesting in the book of Joel is the particular language that it says it 4 times, 3 times in one chapter. Never again, never again, never again, never again. Never again, it says, will they live in fear. Never again will enemies come against them. Never again will their enemies be seen at them. So the book of Joel, the entirety of the book of Joel is a singular, prophetically fulfilled event at the end of the time. And it mirrors some of the other language and some of the other prophetic books. Where was I going with that? Anybody? Hamas. Okay. Hamas coming in, right? So as Hamas is coming in against Israel, does anybody know who Hamas is and who Palestine is? Anybody? Biblically, who are they? Michael? The Philistines. It is the Philistines from day one, the sons of Ishmael, right? The Hagarites and the Ishmaelites, they are the Philistines of Goliath and his brothers of Gath, of this particular area that Israel has been set at war with from the beginning of time, and actually comes into fulfillment in the Psalm 83 war. Most of the tribes or the tents of whatever listed in the 11 nations in Psalm 83 are particular regions of Philistia, of the ancient Philistines, of which God says will be the root of the last great push against Jerusalem. That's going on in real time. It literally happened in an instant, while they were literally having a festival centered around peace and security. Everybody tracking? While many are saying peace and security, then sudden destruction will come upon them. There's so many things going on right now in real time. At the same time, you have Egypt. Egypt has been a non-entity for how many thousands of years? Anybody? I don't know, 2,500? 3,500 years? Egypt's been a non-entity. It's interesting that right at the end of the age, Egypt comes back into the sphere, and you see Egypt through a lot of these other prophetic books about Israel, and also in the book of Revelation. Egypt all of a sudden is birthed out. Guess who's at the forefront in the national media? Egypt. And Egypt amassing military infantry brigades, and Egypt closing the Rafah border crossing from Gaza into Egypt, and the Egyptological leadership having backdoor meetings with Israel. You also have Syria amassing all their troops on the Israeli border. You have the Lebanese, the Hezbollah, amassing on the Israeli border. You have the U.S. amassing troops in Jordan on the Jordanian border, right? You have Taliban requesting permission from Iran to use the $85 billion in American equipment that we left them to come across Iran and descend on Jerusalem. You have a global call for the fulfillment of the Islamic eschatological reality from Shia and both Sunni. If anybody doesn't know Islam, there's 2 major sects. There's all kinds of minor sects within Islam, but the 2 major ones have their own eschatological reality on what must happen for the Messiah to return. Israel and the Talmudic guys and the Pharisees, they have their version of what must happen for their Messiah to return. The Jews' Messiah, Islamic Messiah. The New Agers have their eons and their ages, the Aquarian age, on what must happen for their Messiah to return, right? And the occultists have their version on what must happen for their Messiah, their Nimrodian arrogance, their Apollyon, Horus, Osiris, you name it, demigods to return. And every single one of them is saying it's right now. In this particular epoch. Every single one of them. And guess what all their messiahs are? Guess what all their messiahs are going to be? They're going to get what they want. Guess what it is? It's the Antichrist. It's the Antichrist. Every single one of them is clamoring and pushing and maneuvering and manipulating for the Messiah. Their Messiah is coming, and it will be the man of perdition. It will be the lawless one. So what we have going on right now, why the prophetic significance of this is so huge, is because all of this must happen by God's wisdom. Literally all of Israel swept over into Jerusalem itself, almost completely seizing Jerusalem before God acts, destroys all their enemies, and then it creates and foments and terraforms the earth for the perfect satanic ritualistic abuse ceremony of trauma and fear and trauma and fear and trauma and fear and trauma and fear, so that the man of peace can arise in Jerusalem itself, create a peace plan in Jerusalem itself, Daniel 9, and then divide Jerusalem, prophetic fulfillment, create an East Palestine and a West Palestine where they share a common capital and have a global governing militaristic paramilitary state in Jerusalem to restore peace and security over the face of the earth, and to usher in a counterfeit millennial reign. So you have a counterfeit Messiah coming, you have a counterfeit New Jerusalem coming, you have the third temple being rebuilt, and then you have a counterfeit millennial reign, and all the world's going to clamor after it. And all this is happening literally in the last 10 days. In the last 10 days it started. We know prophetically what it says. It says that when these things start happening, right, the time of sorrows, that it will be like a woman in labor. What happens when a woman experiences her first contraction? When she's pregnant? McKenna? McKenna, in the back.
You know it's coming soon.
You know it's coming soon. So as soon as you have the first contraction, there is a certainty you cannot turn back the clock. It is imminent, and it is inevitable. What happens with those contractions? McKenna? Stronger and stronger. They get more intense, and the frequency gets closer and closer. That's why Jesus chose that analogy to talk about the second coming, the end of the age, when his disciples were at, what's it going to be like? He's like, oh, I'll be like a woman in labor. And it gets closer and closer and more intense and more intense, right up into the last big push of excruciating suffering, of excruciating pain, and then boom, new life is birthed and all of it goes away. That's what he says, that's what you can expect. And that's what just happened in the last 10 days. If you don't know, another gas pipeline was blown up going from, I think, Norway to Estonia. You guys know Nord Stream 1 and Nord Stream 2 pipelines were blown up. All the energy crisis over the face of the earth. Azerbaijan marched against Armenia. North Korea is getting ready to march against South Korea and to nuke the island Japan. South Korea put 51 million citizens underground. Russia put 40 million citizens underground a couple years ago to practice for this day. They just had a whole nuclear war drill for all their nation. All the Scandinavian countries are holding out nuclear preparation kits for all of Europe, all across Europe. There's movements in Central and South America. There's massive Chinese troop movements across the southern border, massive Chinese troop movements at the northern border, coming across every day. 10,000 Chinese fighting men a day are being let in. Talk to any Customs and Border Patrol, they're being told to stand down to allow them in, right? This is going on in real time. There's movements of things on a world sphere that we can't even understand. The entire Greek Navy just left port to go out to sea. The U.S. blew up a Russian submarine and a Russian destroyer 2 weeks ago. And it just keeps going on and on and on. India and Pakistan over Kashmir said as soon as the U.S. is weak, we're going to nuke each other. So most people don't understand. Most people don't understand Romania and the other Slavic nations and the Balkan nations and Serbia and what they're doing. Most Americans have no understanding of geopolitics and geostrategies. So when it says that the red horse is loosed and peace is taken from the earth and men are given over to slaughter one another, it is not kidding. When it says, God says, when this thing starts, and the green horses lose, the chloros, where we get the word chlorophyll, when the green horses lose, and the sword and famine and pestilence fall, they don't understand. When it says the black horse is loosed and the great reset that they've all been forecasting for you for years, World Economic Forum and UN Agenda 2030 and UN Agenda 2020 and all these other things, all these Davos group, freak show, luminous Luciferian guys, what they're out there doing, they are telling you what the Bible's already told you can expect. Because then when the black horse is loose, it's global hyperinflation. It is the Great Reset, a day's wages for a loaf of bread. And all of them, all the world leaders, it is all a stage. Do not think that there's some mega oppositional thing here. They are all taking us somewhere collectively. And it's all centered on Jerusalem. Everything is centered on Jerusalem. They have an insatiable appetite for Jerusalem. So it's so funny to hear the prognosticators out there and the pundits out there who are God haters, yet maybe they're truthers or whatever they are, right? They're conservative leaning and they're truthers. Deny God and say, I'm agnostic, I'm this, I'm atheistic, but I see these things and I'm given these analysis. Deny God when literally the whole world is fixated on Jerusalem, which is exactly what God said. The smallest, most insignificant sliver of territory on the face of the earth. And yet the entire world is centered on that. And it's going to be increasingly so. So the reality of what's going on here is crazy. Daniel 12, 1 through 4 says this. Talking about the fullness of time. It says, at that time shall arise Michael, the great prince, who has charge of your people, and there shall be a time of trouble, such as never has been since there was a nation till that time. But at that time your people shall be delivered, everyone whose name shall be found written in the book. And many of those who sleep in the dust of the earth shall awake, some to everlasting life, and some to shame and everlasting contempt. And those who are wise shall shine like the brightness of the sky above. And those who turn many to righteousness like the stars forever and ever. But you, Daniel, shut up the words and seal the book until the time of the end. Many shall run in to and fro, and knowledge will greatly increase. The books are breaking open in real time. Everything that God sealed up that people didn't know, people couldn't understand, are starting to break open in real time. You guys have heard me talk about spank him. It's okay, Archer. You guys have heard me talk about God's heavenly OPSEC, right? You guys know what OPSEC is? Anybody? Operational security. God is so wise that He even builds into the scriptures heavenly operational security. He has OPSEC, right? We have that precedence for it even in 1 Corinthians, don't know, 2, 3, 6, 1 Corinthians 6, where he specifically says, if they had known what God was doing, they would not have crucified Christ. They didn't know. God specifically built in heavenly operational security, right? So there is an obscurity even to the timing of these things. There's an intentional obscurity to how they happen, how they transpire, when they break out, what the exact timeline is, because God's wise to do that. It says the mystery that has been hidden in ages past has now been made known to you. He hides things. He obscures things. Jesus talked about speaking in parables. Heavenly operational security. Why? Why was he speaking in parables? He gave you the qualifier. Why? So that they wouldn't even understand what I'm talking about. Because they don't really care anyways. And actually, although salvation is a free gift of God for everybody, at the same time, he builds in these layers where he's like, but I already know their hearts. Which is why when the Pharisees showed up to hear the truth, what was Jesus' response? Who the heck told you guys where to find the truth? Get out of here. It's not for you to even hear. Because God specifically builds in these different layers of stuff as a tacticianer, the true and better tacticianer in heaven, to keep the powers of darkness from manipulating what he does. So what you have all throughout history is the powers of darkness having an obscure understanding of God's prophetic promises, but not understanding the fullness of it, so they just do a scorched earth policy. Have you noticed right before every major move of God, there is a wholesale slaughter of children? That's biblical precedence. in Egypt at the Exodus, at the first advent of Jesus Christ, and at the second advent, the second coming of Jesus Christ. They don't know. They know that the woman, the seed of the woman, is going to crush the seed of the serpent, and all they're going to be able to do is bruise his heel. They don't know how it comes. They don't know when it comes. Scorched earth policy, burn it all down, taint it all, days of Noah, corrupt all flesh, corrupt everything, burn it all down. We don't know how it's coming. Create Space Force, create planetary defense systems. We know he's coming in the clouds. Create directed energy weapons all over the place. We know he's going to send in Jerusalem, take Jerusalem. We know that he's going to stand in Jerusalem. Okay, no, we're going to stand in Jerusalem. We know that he's going to do this. No, we're going to do that. Everything is about a counterfeit move and counter move of the powers of darkness because they don't understand the fullness of time and how God's actually going to do it, which is why God builds an operational security on these things. So it's a very unique qualifier for the reality of what's going on. I don't know why I'm talking about that, but it's important, right? I mean, we could go through Matthew 24, we could go through Luke 21, we could go through Luke 17, we could go through Mark 13, we could go through the whole book of Revelation, we could go through the book of Daniel, we can go through Jeremiah, and all these things that are pointing to the reality of what's going on. But here's what you need to know, is that in every single instance, it is Jerusalem-centric. Even Matthew 24, Luke 21 speaks to it. When you see them converging on Jerusalem, when you see the enemies converging on Jerusalem, know this, it's go time. You're going to hear wars and rumors of wars. There's going to be earthquakes in varying, diverse places. There's going to be famine and pestilence. That's what you don't need to worry about. When you see this happening, that's when you know this is going down. And he gives the parable of the fig tree over and over and over again in each one of those books. Then Jesus gives the parable of the storms. You know when you see a storm coming, you know what's going to expect. Yet you can't discern what's happening right now. And so he's actually trying to tear down even our normalcy bias right now in real time, beloved, so that we would understand the times and start gaining wisdom and knowing what we should do as the church in this church age. There's a signification to it that's beyond comprehension. And again, where's it all going? Here's where I believe it's going right now in real time. This, World War III, is a certainty. It is a certainty. I don't know if you guys saw last night, almost all European and even other Muslim nations are airlifting all their citizens out of Israel. They know it's nuke time. They're pulling them all out. They're cutting off every border. They're pulling them all out. You don't do that because of the cost involved, known logistics, militaristic logistics, unless it is a certainty foregone conclusion. You don't happen to have the largest, most sophisticated aircraft carrier on the face of the planet right off the coast of Israel when Hamas happens to invade. That doesn't happen by happenstance. You don't happen to have Russian troops in Syria already pre-staged because of the deep water port in Tarsus and elsewhere. You don't happen to have that. And you don't happen to have the repudiation of the petrodollar just weeks prior through the BRICS nation and everybody throwing off everything, dumping all their currency, dumping everything, unless you know for certainty that the decision's already been made. We are going to allow ourselves to have a limited nuclear exchange because we need to get humanity to that next level. So here's what I anticipate happening. Speculation informs speculation, right? Is that this entire World War III, and I'm already here. You know, you want to figure out the deception? Listen to Jews, unregenerate Jews, not Messianic Jews. Listen to what unregenerate Jews say. They will speak prophetic utterances on a level you can't even understand because their hearts are still hardened. They're hardened because they rejected the Messiah, Jesus Christ. And until they get so overwhelmed and so crushed by God, when you look at all the scriptures I've already listed, it says God brings them out. God brings the enemies out. God brings the enemies. God entices them. God puts hooks in their jaw and brings them against Jerusalem, against Israel, because he's trying to do something in them that they rejected the first time around. That's to give them a repentant heart that would look on him who they pierced and proclaim that Jesus is the Messiah. That's where it's all going, right? So you want to understand the prophetic timeline of what's going on? Listen to all the Jewish pundits. I listen to Jewish scholars. I listen to Jewish economists. I listen to Jewish sages. because their whole life is around these things, and every word that they say is getting ready for the Antichrist. Their entire reality is fixated on the Antichrist, who they're going to give themselves over to for a time. For a time. So what they're all saying right now is, this is the Valley of Megiddo, the Valley of Jehoshaphat, the Valley of Decision, and God's drawn all the enemies in, and it's getting ready to be the Battle of Armageddon. Guess what it is? It's not the Battle of Armageddon. It's World War III. It's the red horse. Loosed. It's that seal broken. They are going to spin it as if it's the Battle of Armageddon, so that when the Antichrist rises, you're ready to walk into a counterfeit millennial reign of peace and security. This entire World War III scenario is being fabricated by the global elite who know the scriptures, been in God's heavenly OPSEC. They don't understand how it plays out, so they are counterfeiting right now. They are getting ready to counterfeit an Armageddon, so that when the man of perdition arises, you think it's actually the end of it all, and it's Jesus Christ himself. That's why he says, if anybody says he's out here, don't go. Many will be deceived. Many will abandon the faith. Many will abandon the faith. Many will give themselves over. Many will marvel after this guy. Many will clamor for the peace and security, and it will be in Jerusalem, a counterfeit Jerusalem, not the new Jerusalem. It'll be a counterfeit everything. So what they're setting the stage right now for is a counterfeit Armageddon, so that you will, even the elect would be deceived if it were possible, receive the man of lawlessness, the man of perdition, when he arises after this war that's getting ready to break out. It's pre-planned. It's pre-staged. You get to consolidate everything. And notice, for the first time in a very long time, the centrality of what their divide and conquer mechanism is this go around. It's not the thing, whether you took it in your body or not took it in your body. It's not ethnos versus ethnos, right? Black versus white and whatever. It's religion. Yeah. They must have this great cataclysmic counterfeit Armageddon rooted in religion, so that the false prophet can come in and restore your religious identity through a counterfeit ecumenical movement of unity and peace and security. Because look at what religion does. Religion sears the whole face of the earth with a global traumatic experience and masses of death. It says a quarter of the world's population is going to be killed by these things. First seals in the book of Revelation. Quarter of the world's population. How many is that? 2 billion? 2 something billion? And most people think that this is going to be like a World War I, World War II, Vietnam, war in Afghanistan, these long drawn-out grinding wars. It is my presupposition this thing will be over in a matter of 6 weeks, max. From the onset to a peace deal magically coming out on the scene, and everybody's in agreement with it. And because it will be centered on religion, the false prophet is the one who rises first. It is the false prophet who unifies the world because of the traumatic experience first, who then, when the man of perdition comes, says, yeah, everybody, you can give your allegiance to that guy. He is who he says he is. Just like John the Baptist prepared the way for Jesus Christ's ministry. He is who he says he is. Everything's an exact counterfeit. Everything is the exact counterfeit of Jesus Christ. So this is what we're getting ready to experience, beloved, is a counterfeit Armageddon unto a counterfeit millennial reign, unto a rebuilding of the third temple, unto a re-implementation of the animal sacrifices for the remission and the propitiation of sins, unto it all. This is why what's happened in the last 10 days is beyond comprehension. Beyond comprehension. It's interesting that the Jewish, why is that so hard to say? Jewish sages say the book of Ecclesiastes, you know, and it's funny because I just learned this yesterday, and we happened to talk about it last week, where it's like a time, right? A time for peace, a time for war, a time for love, a time to hate, blah, blah. It goes through the time. According to the Jewish sages, those are particular epochs in the history of humanity. Each one of those epochs or epics is a period of 214 years. The last epoch will be the last reign before the Messiah, because they rejected Jesus, before the true Messiah returns. According to them, beginning at the end of this feast day when Hamas entered in, that was on their Jewish calendars of when the last epoch begins. There has been 5,786 years. They know the fullness of humanity is 6,000 years. That's how they read it in the scriptures. and that the last epoch just began when Hamas invaded on all their Jewish calendar type stuff and all their feast days and all their accounting things. And they are literally saying that it's time for a global, unified peace and security with a centralized government based out of Jerusalem. That's what they're saying starting last Saturday. Insane, right? You can't even make this stuff up. It's insane. They believe that the culminant of the epoch is in the spring of 2024. That in the spring of 2024, that is when, boom, it happens. It's funny when you listen to Iran or you listen to Russia or you listen to other nations, they say, we must have nuclear war by the spring of 2024. It's interesting when you listen to the freak show global elite who want to depopulate and mass murder everybody. They say, it must be done mid-2024 before 2025 starts. It's interesting that the New Agers with their Aquarian Age stuff say it must happen sometime between 2024 and 2025. They're all saying the same exact thing. Do you guys think this is a little bit relevant right now? It's radically significantly relevant right now. So what you even have now is this continuation of global lockdowns, this perpetual fear. They need to keep the global lockdowns. You have another divide and conquer strategy among the irreconcilable differences of religion. You have the paving of the way for the false prophet, a consolidation of all religions, a consolidation of all economics, a consolidation of all supply and supply chain, a consolidation of all distribution and food distribution, a consolidation of all powers. Although we know prophetically not everybody's unified, there's still some warring going on. Not everybody's on board at the end of the age. We have a consolidation of a global homogeny to restructure everything that comes with this current war. World War I, you get League of Nations. World War II, you get United Nations. World War III, you get it all. All those were precursors to get to this. And that's what's going on right now. So, it's my I don't know. Contention. Yeah, we get a gold star for Michael. It's my contention that if we do not post-haste break off the death grip of our normalcy bias, we as a church are going to be undone by these things. We must break our normalcy bias. It is not the same. You thought the thing that happened in the last 3 years was any big deal? I was saying from the onset that this is a joke. This is a joke. Anybody could see through that. That was a terraforming of fear. That was a consolidation of and a unification of global governments and of the human psyche. It was, and I said, this whole thing, I can't mention it because I'll get kicked off of everything, that's been going on in the last 3 years, is the last asymmetric warfare strategy softening technique for World War III, which then they'll get what they really want. That was a psychological operation to prepare you for this, what's going on right now. And here we are. I said that 3 years ago, and here we are. It's right here in our faces. So we have to throw off our normalcy biased death grip, or we're going to be overcome by these things. Statistically, they say that 80% of the population, when the greatest of disasters and suffering come upon them, whatever it is, global cataclysms, natural disasters, even just family traumas, 80% of the human psychology will maintain their normalcy because their mind literally fractures because of the depth of the trauma, and they will literally get up tomorrow as Chinese troops are parachuting in, as Hamas is parachuting in, they will get up tomorrow and they'll go pay their insurance bill on their car because they're scared that they would get in trouble if they don't pay it. It's crazy, right? That's how significant the normalcy bias is. And that's even within the church. The normalcy bias is, again, with the sermon on time, that there's always tomorrow. There's always a time. This will fizzle out. This will go away. This will whatever. I'm just going to get up and go to work tomorrow. I'm going to get up and do, because I don't want to get in trouble by the government. I don't want to get in trouble by the police. I don't want to get in trouble by the IRS. Everything's different. Everything is different. And we need to allow the Holy Spirit to fill us to overflowing, to give us the wisdom, not to the discerning of the times, which is important, but to know what we must do. What we must do like the sons of Issachar. It's crazy how that manifests all the time. So let me ask you this, guys. Where's China at in all this? I've been talking about the Chinese kinetic invasion for 8 years. I've been talking about it. The armored brigades on Vancouver Island, the masses of troops in the southern border in Venezuela and elsewhere, the high kinetic availability, the shipping containers filled with weapons that have been caught in the port, the fact that we sold our deep water port, Long Beach Harbor, to China, and they've been amassing equipment in there unabated, the fact that Governor Newsom's name was mentioned in a hot mic incident from Chinese generals saying that they have been assured by Governor Newsom's stand-down orders all the way to the Rocky Mountains when they invade. Where's China at? Have you guys heard a word about China with all this? Russia, Ukraine? What happened with Ukraine?
Exactly.
What happened with Ukraine? With the $800 billion of armaments and all of Europe converging in there, giving all their strategic oil reserves, giving all their weapons, what? They just disappeared?
Yeah.
I guess the war stopped because now there's something going on in Israel? Where's China at? How about the Hamas, Hezbollah, drug cartel, Chinese sleeper cells? Iranian Republican Guard Special Forces? How about the fact that China and Russia were invited to participate in our Grid X1 and Grid X2 drills to learn how to take down our power grid? They were invited in and then bring it back online without destroying critical infrastructure. Did you know that happened? How about the Chinese general who bought 200 square miles of Texas ground bordering the Rio Grande border, that all the Chinese troops are coming right in across the Rio Grande into a sanctuary, into a safe haven owned by a Chinese general who put in a heavy lift aircraft landing strip on his own private property, and even the Governor Abbott knows about it in Texas, and they do nothing because they're all given stand-down orders. Where's China at? They're not commenting on anything. They're not mentioning on anything. They're not committing troops. They're not committing strategic reserves anywhere. Where are they? They're getting ready to hit us. Well, we're distracted on a two-front war. Think about this. You guys think the Hamas infiltration of Israel was a big deal? What they prepared for in the U.S., and I've been made aware of for the last 15 years, is this is no exaggeration, 10,000-fold greater than what Hamas just did to Israel. Suddenly, in an instant, in a single day, in a single hour. Suddenly, in an instant, single day, single hour. You think we might need to get off of our normalcy bias here in America? Because Israel had it, didn't they? Yeah. Highest, hyper-vigilant, militaristic nation on the face of the earth. Highest technologically advanced nation on the face of the earth. All the Silicon Valley stuff generally comes out of Israel. All the AI stuff generally comes out of Israel. There's nothing as technologically and militaristically advanced as the nation of Israel. Yet, in a single hour, it goes to show you that there's some silly business going on here. All their defenses were overwhelmed. Military bases were taken. Air Force bases were taken. F-35 fighter jets were taken. And civilians are being slaughtered by guys on power parachutes. It's insane, right? So again, what in the world is going on? And more importantly, we must get off of our normalcy bias and get ready for what's coming next. So let's break into tangible. I won't read Deuteronomy 28. You want to know what's going on? Read Deuteronomy 28. Deuteronomy 28 in detail, specifically, God lays out in the most intimate detail the curses that come upon a nation that rejects Him. You can't miss it. Including the immigrants in your nation rising above you. Including, foreign enemies coming against you. Including the collapse of your economies and hyperinflation of your monetary system. It's all listed in Deuteronomy 28, right? So, let me ask you this, I guess, and we can open it up. Because there's a signification here that goes beyond words as far as metadata details of geopolitics and geostrategy right now. Is what do you guys think we need to be doing? And what question do you guys have about what's going on? And let me ask you this, or let me give this caveat, because this is being recorded or whatever. If you question or comment, keep it short and curt, so I can repeat it into the microphone for your brothers and sisters online that are part of this church body as well too. And then I'll try to answer it. Send it. Anybody. Send it.
Abraham Accord and the Noahide Covenant.
Okay, he said Abraham Accord and Noahide laws. We'll say Noahide laws. The Abrahamic Accord or Abraham Accord actually occurred, what was that, like 18 months ago? Maybe not even that long, where they all came together and actually the global community ratified these different aspects of the Abraham Accord in Jerusalem on particular ground as a consecration. All this has been set in place. All that, the Abraham Accord too, is also relevant to what's going on with the Temple Institute in Israel. You guys familiar with the Temple Institute? What's the Temple Institute? It's the rebuilding of the third temple. They have, like an erector set or Lincoln log set, they have off-site rebuilt every single detail of the third temple off-site and then deconstructed it, including the vestments, the acacia wood, all the requirements, the Levitical requirements, all the vestments of the Levitical practices that they need to do, the ephods and the menorahs and the candles and the altars and all these things, to the exact perfect dimensions, to the thickness of the curtains and everything else. They have constructed it all off-site. They have now found the red heifer and brought it back in. They've gotten approval by the Knesset, don't quote me on that, to re-implement animal sacrifices. They have done their first practice ritualistic sacrifice in Jerusalem. All of it's done waiting for the go signal. And when they get the go signal, they say they'll be able to have that third temple erected and re-implementation of all the Levitical requirements of animal sacrifice in less than 3 months, as soon as they get the green light. That's how far down the prophetic timeline we are. Even all that stuff is, I think, contained with some of the attributes of the Abrahamic Accord. What's important about the Noahide laws that he brought up is the Noahide laws have actually been adopted by the United States government. You don't know that. I think it was Bush Jr. signed it in through an executive order that the U.S. is, don't quote me on this because I get lots of stuff jumbled up, that the U.S. is subordinate to the Noahide laws, signed in by Bush Jr. The United Nations operates off of the Noahide laws. Why is the Noahide laws important? Because technically, according to Judaism, is that Gentiles can only be held accountable to the Noahide laws, but they can't be held accountable to the Torah. Correct? Is that correct? Gentiles can only be held accountable to the Noahide laws. So they've actually subordinated the whole world, not just the U.S., to that, lots of nations, to the Noahide laws. And then the Jews have the Torah because they're getting ready for everything to be Jerusalem-centric. Actually, officially legislated or legalized precedents that you were unaware that it was happening. Particular attribute about the Noahide laws, which is prophetically significant, is if you go against the Noahide laws, guess what the punishment is? Death by beheading. Sound familiar? And I saw all those who were beheaded for the testimony of Jesus Christ. And they're before the altar going, how long, oh God? How long, oh God? How long? So Noahide laws. It is officially adjudicated, judiciary processes already in place. Significant. It's done. All this stuff is done. People don't understand it. Questions? Yeah, so for the online listeners, he was making a comment about Armenia and Azerbaijan. A lot of people, well, no, I forget how strategically dumbed down we are as Americans. It's not a knock on you guys. We're victims. We've been victimized by this wicked government. There has already been an Armenian genocide of Christians in Armenia, and now it's happening again. Currently, right now, there's 120,000 Christians on foot fleeing across open ground in Azerbaijan. Now, this is even relatable to what went on with ISIS and the Levant 2014 to 2016 and a little bit onward. Most people don't know is that ISIS was specifically raised up as an intelligence agency proxy of the Five Eyes intelligence apparatus. ISIS was created. It was not organic. It was created overnight. It was funded by us. It was funded by our equipment. Think of all the equipment left there for them to use as well too. And it was very strategic. It goes to World War II, now into this time frame, that they had a mandate from the global intelligence communities, or more specifically Western-centric intelligence communities, to do a blood purge of the Levant of Christians. That was their mandate. Notice every single place that ISIS went was every church that was planted in the first century in your Bibles. Every church in the Church of Acts and planted by the apostles, they specifically went and obliterated it and did a bloodletting of the entire land. I was told that when I was over there, embedded with the Peshmerga, that's what they were doing. They were doing a ritualistic blood cleansing of the Levant to pave the way for a global caliphate, which in our lexicon is the arrival of the Antichrist. Same thing at World War II. Most people don't know why, through all their occultic practices and the Thule Society and through the Veil Maidens and all their channeling and their worship of the Black Sun, the reason why the final solution was rooted in the furnaces, the burning of the Jews. Tell me how efficient that is. If you're a central planner, is that efficiency? That is the least efficient thing you could ever do. It was specifically because of occultic practices. They were collecting the ashes of God's holy people, and they were taking them all across the land of Europe and purging Europe of any Judeo-Christian things through occultic practices. What happened after World War II to Christianity in Europe? It's dead. It's dead. There is no Christianity in Europe whatsoever. None. Now, there are Christians in Europe, but there is no Christianity. There's no orthodoxy. There's no nothing. It's dead. They did it. Now they did the same thing in Levant through ISIS, because they're all getting ready for what comes next. So yeah, Azerbaijan and Armenia, Iran and Pakistan, North Korea, South Korea, North Korea here, China on Taiwan, China against the United States. There's been such a background alliance being formed with many of the Central and South American countries have been conspiring in league with China and a little bit of Russia thrown in there to completely overwhelm America. Oh, and by the way, our entire government's on board with that, if you haven't noticed. They're all on board with it. This is part of the plan. So, Armenia, that's where that came from. Questions? Go ahead, bro.
Gog and Magog war after the millennium.
Okay, he said Gog and Magog war after the millennium. So Gog and Magog war, if you guys aren't familiar, Ezekiel 38 and 39. So there's kind of two places where I go Gog, Magog, Ezekiel 38 and 39, but also the destruction of Mystery Babylon. Jeremiah 50, 51 and Revelation 18. It's all talking about the destruction of Babylon, the daughter of Babylon, Mystery Babylon. So it's not Babylon proper. I know there's a lot of scholars that try to say it's a revived Iraq, a revived Levant. I just could never subscribe to that. No matter how much I've tried to understand it from that perspective, I could never subscribe to that. It's my presupposition that America is unequivocally 99.9999 repeating the United States of America is Mystery Babylon. And so he asks, is Gog and Magog war after the millennial reign? I don't know. That's that heavenly OPSEC that I think God specifically keeps it obscure. It reads as if it is a precursor to the tribulation period. It reads as if it's a significant precursor, but I do understand the language contained within there and the references to them. I think it's in Revelation 20. Don't quote me on that. That they show up again at the end times, at the end of the millennial reign, and that is somehow associated with the Battle of Armageddon in the Valley of Megiddo as well too. There's differing viewpoints on that. I don't know the timeline. I lean towards that it's actually contained within it, and it makes a big transition in Ezekiel 38:10, that it's actually an offshoot of Psalm 83 war, rolls into Ezekiel 38:39, also rolls into the destruction of Mystery Babylon. In Ezekiel 38:10, it says, and also at that time, it's going through how they're coming against Israel, they're going to converge on Jerusalem. It says, and also, I told you I'm big on words. Circle that. So now the scripture are telling me to transition my thought. And also at that time, they will say, come, let us go up against the land of unwalled villages. We're the only nation in the world that has no borders, no defenses, no anything, and we're going to destroy them. Because here's Now here's the tangible, here's the empirical, here's the objective. You cannot destroy Israel unless you remove the United States first. That's why it's relevant to me when I say and also at that time. They cannot come against God's land until America, their only singular ally on the face of the earth, realistically, with the whole backing of the U.S. Armada and our naval ability to project power, and even our telecoms and our signals intelligence capabilities, you have to get rid of America. You have to. And so when you look at these sleeper cells, when you look at China, when you look at dreams and visions of like a Henry Groover or Dimitri Duderman or a David Wilkerson or a Corrie ten Boom, I've had my own dreams and visions of it, that America is done in a single day, in a single hour, then they can take Israel. So that's Gog and Magog. I could never say one way or the other, and I wouldn't say one way or the other. I say this is kind of my understanding of it. Could be totally wrong. God's operational security is wise to not let us go. We can exactly march it out. I mean, you think about the Pharisees and the scribes studying for the first advent of Jesus Christ. All their entire life was studying the Scriptures, studying the Scriptures, studying the Scriptures, studying the Scriptures. Nah, that's not him. Kill him. Okay, next, study the Scriptures. Right? They missed it. And their entire lives revolved around studying and waiting for the deliverer, for Emmanuel, for the Messiah to come and deliver them from all their foes. And they totally missed it. I think it'll be the same at the second coming. We can study and have a rough idea, but if in our hubris we think we understand eschatology, we're going to miss it. There's too many dogmatic scholars out there talking about all things about the end times, telling you, this is what it is. And then many are going to be deceived into receiving the Antichrist. Just like many at the first time were deceived into rejecting the Messiah. Another is going to come in my name, and him you will receive. That's what Jesus said. So, next.
So the question is, what are we going to do?
Okay.
Do we expect China to come?
Yeah. So Linda asks, what are we supposed to do? Okay, let's talk about that. What are we supposed to do? Well, I'll tell you what, you're not supposed to fear, because that's not what you've been given, and it doesn't glorify the Lord. You've not been given a spirit of fear, timidity, but power, love, and a sound mind. Sophroneo, right? We talk about it all the time, sound mind. We do know that we're not of those who fear bad news, Psalm 112. Our hearts are steadfast, trust in the Lord. Our hearts are secure. We have no fear. We are not shaken. It says we do not fear bad news. We do know that we are told to, when you begin to see all these things taking place, Luke 21, you stand up and you look up because your redemption draws nigh, right? We are told, I do know that we're told, Isaiah 61 and 2, that you are to arise and shine, for your light has come, and the glory of the Lord has arisen upon you. Though darkness is over the earth, and thick darkness is over the peoples, the glory of God has arisen upon you. Stand and be enumerated. I do know, as we already read in Daniel 12, that those who are, it says, a time the likes of which never has been, never will be again. But those who are wise in the Lord will turn many back to righteousness. I do know that you have a mission set to proclaim the gospel of Jesus Christ harder and faster with more efficacy than you ever have in your life before. Yeah. I do know that you were commanded to make the most of every opportunity, redeem the time because the days are evil. I know that. And I do know that we have a mandate to be among, or to be enumerated among the 5 wise virgins who do not grow tired and weary in waiting for our Lord, whose lamps are trimmed. You trim the wick on your lamp. Why? So that it burns brighter. So you cut off the sooty part of your lamp so that it burns brighter. You have extra stores of oil, which is, yes, tangible things, but also the anointing and the power of the Holy Spirit is often what it's referring to. You have extra stores of it. You do not grow weary in the 3rd and 4th watch of the night as you longingly wait for your Savior, so that when He arrives, you're ready to enter into His presence and recline at His table. I do know that. I do know that Scriptures have told us that a wise man foresees trouble coming and plans accordingly, but a fool goes on and suffers for it. And I also know that Jesus said, Matthew 24, see, I've told you about all these things ahead of time so that you won't be caught unaware. And I do know that there's men and women out there that are telling you exactly what's getting ready to happen. So now when you combine all that together, the question is, what do you think you should be doing? What do you think you should be doing? Spiritual, emotional, physical, practical preparation. Praying, interceding, the cutting away. You go into the Cherith ravine, right? Like Elijah did. The cutting away the sin, the circumcision of the heart. You know the sin of Achan. You can't stand against your enemies when you have this thing hidden in your tent. You've been made liable for destruction on the field of battle. Sin of Achan, Joshua 7. You better purify your camp. Spiritual preparation. Emotional preparation. Is this causing you guys fear or anxiety? How about you young moms? Are you like, but what about my kids? I want to see my kids grow up. Yeah. And I don't want my kids to suffer. And you better do some business with the Lord. The Lord loves your kids more than you ever could. Mm-hmm. The Lord loves your kids more than you ever could. Either you trust the Lord or you don't. And either you've entrusted them to the Lord or you haven't. It's the emotional resiliency. How about racing thoughts? That's not of the Lord. Quiet confidence. And repentance and rest is your salvation. And quietness and trust is your strength, but you will have none of it. Quietness and trust. Are you secure in the Lord? Are you hidden in the Lord? Are you resting in the Lord? Are you Psalm 91ing in the Lord? Are you Psalm 27 in the Lord? Let them do their worst. Though a troop advance against me, I won't fear. I mean, read the Psalms. Are you Psalm 33 in the Lord? Are you Psalm 44 in the Lord? Are you Psalm 27 in the Lord? Are you Psalm 37 in the Lord? Is it hidden in your heart? We forced our kids to memorize Psalm 27 and Psalm 91, word for word, all the way through it, because I knew what they're going to need. They're going to have a knowing of their God, because those who know their God will be strong and go forth and do exploits. So we put it in their heart. Today, what happened when the words turned off when we were singing?
We just kept going. Kept singing.
Most of you did.
Kept singing.
But you didn't know the words. So then, let's hide some word in our heart. Let's hide some worship in our heart. Let's print off worship. Let's think tangible. Let's print off worship songs. So that we have them, so that we can continue to sing and glorify the Lord. Because 2 Chronicles 20, God prescribed that the worship leaders go in front of the army and then He routs them. When you're singing and praising God, then He routs the enemies. So maybe we should do maybe somebody should, in practical preparation, start making binders of worship music. $1 a piece for a 3-ring binder. Do it. Spend the money on the ink. Spend the money on the paper. How about parallel economies, physical preparation? What are you guys doing with your money? What are you spending your money on? Where's your money locked up in? It's locked up. If you can't touch it, you don't own it. It's in IRAs, 401ks, blah, blah, blah. Can't give you any financial advice. All I can say is start thinking. Don't let your normalcy bias jack you up. Well, I could get 1.7% on this CD. Good luck with that. You don't own any of it. It's gone. It's gone. Everybody is dumping the dollar right now. Every nation in the world is repudiating the dollar. They refuse to take payment in dollar. They completely rejected the petrodollar, which is the only reason why the U.S. economy stays afloat. And that's why everybody's clamoring for World War III. In the natural is because of economies. So what are you doing with your money? How much food do you have? Do you have the ability to have enough food to recalibrate your mind and let your normalcy bias be redefined by the Holy Spirit? See, that's why you practically prepare. You prepare so that you're an asset, not a liability. You prepare to give space, breathing room. You don't need to go out to the hordes in Philadelphia to go get food at Walmart because a wise man foresees trouble coming and plans accordingly. But a fool goes on and suffers for it, and then you run out there in a flash mob in Philadelphia and get pistol whipped by some gangbanger for a loaf of bread. Hello, use your brains, right? Like God's given us prudence and shrewdness to see these things. So there's practical preparation. How do we build out parallel economies? Locals. A lot of us here are transplants. We don't know anybody. We don't know the butcher. We don't know the farmer. We don't know the person who sells XYZ at their farm. We don't know the rancher. We don't know the gunsmiths. We don't know the mechanics and the welders and electricians, blah, blah. Parallel economy's got to start getting figured out right now. It's too late. When the first salvo opens up, or like Hamas, when the Chinese are parachuting in, or when Colorado Springs and Cheyenne Mountain and Dulce Base that are all around us, and Los Alamos and all these things that are right around us in this four corners, they are all primary tier 1 targets. When they all get hit and everything shuts down and there's no goods coming or going, we're kind of isolated here. You guys know that, Four Corners folk. We're very isolated here. Well, now what? So how about we wrestle that out now, willingly, rather than later on, desperately? How about you practically prepare now, willingly, to be an asset so that you're not a liability and you're not knocking on each other's door going, I thought it was so stupid what Jamie's always talking about, and I didn't do it. But what I did do is pay for this, this, and this, and this, but I didn't want to buy food because I didn't want to look foolish. So pride goes before the fall, right? Instead, you're like, okay, this is what I have. Let's pray that the Lord would bless it and multiply it. I want to be an asset to the body.
Yes.
How about physical preparation? How about your bodies? How you guys doing? Takes some resiliency to be a refugee on foot. I've seen it too many times. Takes some resiliency even for your body to endure the physiological stress responses that may occur with difficult things. Takes some resiliency physically. It matters. It matters. Are you an asset or a liability? That's what it always gets back to. Questions? Comments? Practical preparation.
What does it look like to die to self?
Oh. Michael said, what's it look like to die to self? Allow me to answer your question with another question. Zoolander quote, by the way. Don't hold it against me. I watched a lot of movies BC, before Christ. Right? What do you think the process looks like to be murdered? How do you think it feels to be murdered? How do you think it feels to be killed? How do you think it feels to be slain? How do you think it feels to be crucified on a first century torture device? That's what it looks like to die to self. To die to self. The mortification of the flesh, the crucifying of the flesh, the putting to death the deeds of the flesh. Look at all the language of it. There is no Pollyanna, lukewarm, seeker-friendly, Bethel Hillsong, occultic washing away of what it looks like to die to self. Death to self is painful. It is a cutting away. Look at Jesus says, it's a sword. Double-edged sword. For what? Hacking. Hacking of even down to joint and marrow. I'm hacking. It is not a scalpel. Ooh, a little sin issue here. Let me help you work it out. Here we go. Let's get to coffee and have accountability. We'll have coffee 3 times a week for 12 years, and I'll be your accountability partner. We'll help progressively sanctify that. Jesus did not say, it's a scalpel that I operate with. He said it's a double-edged sword to the dividing, to the hacking of soul and spirit, joint and marrow, flesh. That's what he uses. So what does it look like to die to self? I think it looks like whatever you all got going on in your minds right now. Because some of you are wild-eyed. That's what I think it looks like. I think it looks uncomfortable. I think there's fear and consternation. I think there's self-preservation. I think there's cowardice involved that has to be killed. I think there's luxuries and comforts and dissipations. I think there's anxieties. I think there's fears for the future. I think it's all your lofty ideas about what this life should be for you, because it's all about you and all about you and all about you, and now it's getting disrupted. God's messing up your plans for your life because Hamas invaded Israel, and transhuman movement and space-based weapons platforms and Chinese invasions and astral catastrophism is coming our way. And it's disrupting what you had planned for your life.
Oh my gosh.
And I think it looks very, very painful. Yet, like any necrotic thing, any gangrenous thing, it must be hacked off so that you can live. And live abundantly. So that you can be healed systemically. No more septic shock in your reality. Full purging. The true and better antibiotic of the light of God, sanitizing your whole body inside and out. And all those things get hacked away, and all those things get cut away. Why? So that you can be a useful tool in the hands of the Master. So that you can actually fulfill the position in this generation that He foreknew you to fulfill. And maybe it's to go to the sword, as the scripture says boldly with your head held high like a Stephen, and you proclaim the gospel one last time. Maybe it's to prison, because the scripture says those for the sword to the sword, those for prison to prison. This calls for patient endurance on behalf of the saints. Maybe it's to see your head roll to the glory of God, knowing that you just got invited to experience the highest honor in the land of the living that anybody could ever experience, and you will have a commendation pinned upon your chest from everlasting to everlasting, because you did not love your life so much as you were afraid to lose it for His sake. And He goes, now you get a special position before my throne for all of eternity. Who are those, God? Who is that who's before your throne worshiping you day and night? Who has that special position? You don't know who that is, John? You don't know who that? Oh, those are the ones that were beheaded for the testimony of Jesus Christ. See, they get highly exalted for all creation. They knew their God that intimately. They knew the high honor of being fully the highest form of unity with Christ, dying for Him as He died for you. I think that's what it looks like. I think it looks way different than what the church has told you. I think it looks like gnarly, guttural, savage, teeth-gritting, cutting away of the flesh, singleness of mind, fixation of mind, an eternal perspective, a kingdom mindset that never falters. They overcome by the blood and lamb, the word of their testimony, and they do not love their life so much as they're afraid to lose it. That's what I think it looks like to die to self. And I think there's all kinds of layers in there that we don't even want to know because we would shrink back. But in due season, the Lord allows you and takes you to the next level. He'll allow you to walk by faith, not by sight, so that you can be pleasing to Him. Because He says, without faith, it's impossible to please me. It's impossible to please me. I'm going to I'm going to beat the hell out of you. Literally, God is setting about to beat the hell out of you so that you'll live for Him and live for His kingdom. He wants to beat the Egypt out of you. He wants to crush the Babylon out of you. He wants to crush the double-mindedness out of you. He wants to mortify and crucify the flesh out of you so that you can live for Him. And He's like, and then watch what I'll do with your life. I think that's what it looks like. But what do I know?
I think it's important.
There's tangible things that you need to do. Do not neglect them. There's tangible things that you can allocate your resources to. There's tangible things that you can do. I won't mention it on here because I'll get kicked off. There's very tangible things that you can do to be an asset rather than liability. And the asset is that you have a soundness of mind when all the world around you is unhinged. That's what it means to be an asset. Let them be unhinged. God's put it on the wicked. He says, I'll choose their delusions. Deuteronomy 28, I'll put confusion on them. It says they'll eat in distress and in secret. It says they'll be like wandering. They'll be out of their minds with delusions because these things. Their hearts will fail them for fear of what they see coming on the earth and looking at the things coming in the heavens. Didn't even get into Apophis. That's where all this is going. And my purview is the astrocatastrophism. That's why the push for rampant, incessant, right now global depopulation and sterilization and consolidation is because of the astrocatastrophism that they know is coming. They locked onto it years ago. They think they can beat God's judgment. That's the reason for the deep underground military bases. That's the reason for the creation of Space Force. That's the reason for the creation of a global planetary defense system. Did you know that exists? There is a global planetary defense system with directed energy space-based weapons platforms out there because they know what's coming. And it's all happened in the last 3 years. Boom, 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 boom. Depopulate, 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 sterilize, sterilize, consolidate, consolidate, consolidate. And the last thing that they need is a limited nuclear exchange so they can eradicate a couple billion people real quick. Because in all their simulations that they ran in May of 2019, this is all documented, was that the number one threat was not the effects of the asteroid. The number one threat to humanity was the human chaos factor. That was what all their findings said. So they said their solutions, you can read their white paper, their solutions were you must consolidate all communications beforehand without the people knowing it. You must consolidate all forms of food distribution and allocation. You must consolidate all media and all social media. You must consolidate and centralize all government planning. And you must consolidate and reduce all mobility. Enter the green movement and the push for electric vehicles. You have to kill mobility so that the people are manageable. And you have to reduce the population in as fast and as hard as you can, because that's the threat, not the asteroid. Human chaos factor is the number one threat. That was their findings. Their published findings. This is the reason for, whether you realize it or not, the PCR test genetic data banks being stored in China. They are creating a genetic ark. And they're looking for particular markers for who is viable to keep alive. Interesting. That's exactly what they showed you in the movie Greenland. All this is part and parcel to what they know is coming, including the immediacy of an impending World War III. So, let me open that can of worms for you right before we close out.
Yeah.
It's crazy when you think about the detailed prophetic fulfillment. So you have Obadiah 4 that says, though you set your nest among the stars, I'll bring you low. So they're trying to get off Earth. Hello, pay attention to Elon Musk. They're calling it the Ark to get people off Earth. And in Revelation 6, it talks about them hiding themselves in the rocks of the earth. Look at all the deep underground military bases that they're all running into right now. The scriptures are so detailed about what they're going to try to do because they know the judgment of God's coming. They know it's coming. And like every little detail is in scriptures, just most people don't read their Bibles. So they don't know what God's talking about. But yeah, he announced it. We locked onto this thing. Modern monetary policy is out of the outcome of this asteroid. Spin into oblivion, it's all coming down. War into oblivion, it's all coming down. Borders don't matter. Money doesn't matter. Governments don't matter. Militaries don't matter. It's all been about incessant practical preparation, moving things on a chessboard while you're unaware because of that thing that they locked onto. And by the way, it's supposed to be visible in the sky to the naked eye where they can't hide it anymore. Guess when? 2025. 2025. See the time frames keep matching up? Everybody's saying the same thing. Everybody's doing the same thing. So, you guys tired of hearing me talking yet? I'm going to go ride an asteroid. Let me ride that asteroid. Somebody can do it. If Bruce Willis can do it, I can do it.
Where does the alien delusion come from?
Oh, Alicia. Oh, you're going to make her brother stumble. She said, where does the alien deception come into all this? Oh, man. The alien deception, I know. Connect all these things together. They all, macro worldview, they're all connected. But the alien deception is a radical, significant phenomenon. I don't know if you guys just saw the thing that happened over the weekend. It was recorded all across the U.S. This big giant white orb and then emitting these things. You have all the Navy pilots coming out. You have the deep state whistleblowers coming out of Skunk Works and Area 51 and other different engineering firms and stuff like that. Private sector and governmental militaristic sector and intelligence apparatus. The alien deception thing is huge. Huge. And if as a Christian you dismiss it outright, you're going to be so undone by what they're getting ready to lose. You have Project Bluebeam, you have Project Blue Book, you have voice to skull technology that they have the capabilities of, reverse engineered anti-gravitical propulsion craft and everything else. And you have actually biblical precedents for all of these things. Again, the church has failed us so miserably. You have the wheel within a wheel in Ezekiel. You have a third of these heavenly creature things that have rebelled against God that are doing things. You have chariots of fire. You have all kinds of stuff listed in scriptures that you don't know and understand that they have strategically undermined and not taught you so that they can be used for the great deception when the time comes. So, the alien deception, disclosure, self-disclosure stuff, all of that is part and parcel to the great deception. Wars, rumors of wars, that stuff, that's not deception. I mean, you're being deceived into the reality of what they're doing, but there is coming a great deception, a great deception that even the elect would be deceived if it was possible. Now notice, as we're talking about Jerusalem-centric, where does the Antichrist come? Jerusalem. Where does he stand and proclaim himself to be God? Jerusalem. How does he affirm that he is who he says he is?
Signs and wonders.
Signs and wonders. Lying signs and wonders, even calling down fire from the heavens. This is not a man. The Antichrist will not be a man. He will look like a man. He will look like the Nordic aliens that all the people in the ufology world look like. He'll look like the golden age of the gods, just like when people encountered angels all throughout the Old and the New Testament. They're beautiful specimens of what we would consider the human image. Beautiful specimens. Tall, grand, supernatural. Guess what? A third of those guys rebelled against God. A third of those guys are actively working to make you an enemy of God while you're unaware. And those guys, the golden age of the gods, as it was in the days of Noah, as it was in the days of Lot, so shall be the coming of the Son of Man. He's told you what to expect. That's where the alien deception comes into play. It'll be one of those central things after the wars. This is speculation based on what the occultists say, what the governments are saying, and what Scripture alludes to without seeing through a glass dimly, right? Is that after the global traumatic experience of a nuclear exchange, have you noticed anything about the UFO phenomenon? What do they always say that UFOs are centered around? Our nuclear weapons facilities and our nuclear power plants. They seem to be highly interested in what we do with nuclear fissile materials and these different radiological isotopes. That's what they're always putting in. I watched a compilation of every Fox News and CNN comment about disclosure and soft disclosure. Every single pundit they had on specifically mentioned nuclear. Now we're getting ready to have a nuclear exchange. What do you think they've been sowing the predictive programming for? That because we have a nuclear exchange, these guys show up because they're so altruistic and benevolent to usher humanity into the next evolutionary process to protect us from destroying each other and to restore peace and security. And they affirm their godhood, deity, supremacy by lying signs and wonders. So the alien thing, do not be dismissed. They're extraterrestrial. What's that mean? Extraterrestrial. Not of Earth, beyond Earth. An angel is extraterrestrial. Hello? They are ETs. They're the ETs. That's what's going on. It's all going to be used at the same time. But you need the global traumatic experience, mass death, economies collapse, and the pestilence and the famine that comes from it, and the nuclear winters that come from it, and the global chaos and the bloodshed that comes from it, before the human psyche is ready to receive these guys as their saviors. Counterfeit. Everything's an exact counterfeit of Jesus Christ. And the whole world's clamoring for him. The 12th Imam of Islam is not fully human. The Messiah of the Jews, which we know is Jesus, but the one they're looking for is not fully human. The Nirvana, Maitreya, Gaia worshiping, what they see coming is not fully human. All the occultists and all the adepts talk about the rising of Osiris, the rising of Apollo or Apollyon or Nimrod, who was not fully human. And that they're returning soon